The living room felt suffocating, the air thick with unspoken tension. I sat on the worn couch, my legs curled beneath me, trying to make myself invisible as the argument between my mother and my stepfather escalated. The fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting a harsh glow that mirrored the chaos brewing around me. I could hear the sharp edge of their voices, each word a dagger that pierced the fragile atmosphere of our home. Bills lay scattered on the coffee table, their presence a constant reminder of our financial struggles, but it wasn't just the money that had brought on this confrontation. It was something deeper, something darker that I could sense, but couldn't fully comprehend. My heart raced as I listened, a mix of fear and anger bubbling within me. I had always trusted my stepfather, believed in the facade he presented to the world. But now, as I watched my mother's face contort with pain and frustration, I felt the threads of that trust unraveling. I wanted to scream, to tell him to stop, to protect my mother from the venomous words he hurled at her, but the fear of escalating the situation kept me silent. Instead, I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms as I held back the torrent of emotions clawing at my insides. The walls of our home, once my sanctuary, felt like they were closing in around me. I could see the cracks in my mother's composure, the way her shoulders trembled as she fought back tears. She was a shadow of the woman I had known, strong, vibrant, full of life. In stark contrast, the man who stood across from her, shouting and waving his hands as if trying to physically dominate the room, felt like a stranger. I wanted to reach out to her, to tell her it would be okay, but I knew better than to interrupt. I was merely a spectator in this twisted play, my role limited to watching as my family disintegrated before my eyes. Later that evening, after the storm had passed, I found my mother sitting alone in the dim light of the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. The silence between us was heavy, filled with unspoken words and shared pain. I moved closer, the weight of her sadness pulling at my heartstrings. I wanted to comfort her, to ease the burden she carried on her shoulders, but I didn't know how. I hesitated, searching for the right words, but all I found was the hollow echo of my own fear. As I sat down beside her, I noticed the tears glistening in her eyes, reflecting the flickering candlelight on the table. It was then that she broke, the facade crumbling as she revealed the truth about my stepfather, his infidelity, his emotional abuse. Each revelation was like a knife twisting in my gut, igniting a burning rage within me. I felt a fire ignite in the pit of my stomach, a fierce determination to protect my mother from the man who had taken so much from her, from us. The realization hit me like a freight train. It was up to me to fight back, to reclaim the life we had lost. I spent that night in restless contemplation, my mind racing with thoughts of how I could shield my mother from the man who had become a monster in my eyes. I could no longer sit idly by while he tormented us. I had to be clever, strategic. I needed to gather evidence, to expose him for the fraud he was. The plan began to form in my mind, a resolve hardening within me as I vowed silently to protect my mother at all costs. I would not let his darkness consume us any longer. As I lay in bed, the shadows of my thoughts danced along the walls, whispering promises of vengeance and justice. I wasn't just a victim anymore, I was a fighter. In that moment, I understood that the house of vengeance I was building would not only be a fortress for my mother but a testament to our resilience. No longer would we be the silent witnesses to his cruelty. I would rise from the ashes of our suffering, determined to reclaim our lives, to forge a path through the darkness that had enveloped us for far too long. I stood in the shadows of my stepfather's office, the hum of the air conditioning a constant backdrop to my racing thoughts. The walls, adorned with accolades and photographs of his so-called successes, felt suffocating. Each framed moment served as a reminder of the man he pretended to be, a facade I now sought to dismantle. My heart pounded in my chest as I meticulously began my covert investigation into his life, an endeavor fueled by a blend of fear and determination. I had always been the quiet observer, the one who listened more than spoke. This trait, once seen as a flaw, was now my greatest asset. As I sifted through the seemingly endless papers cluttering his desk, I noticed a pattern, a series of transactions that didn't quite add up. I felt a surge of adrenaline course through my veins. I was onto something. I began to take notes, jotting down figures and dates that seemed to flicker like neon signs in the dark. Every piece of information I uncovered was a small victory against the man who had brought so much pain into our lives. Days turned into weeks, and my investigation unfolded like a tightly wound coil ready to spring. I noticed my stepfather's interactions with his business partners, his conversations laced with veiled threats and subtle manipulation. It was as if I had stepped into a sinister game where I needed to outsmart the players, all while maintaining my guise of innocence. I took to observing him at social gatherings, blending into the background, a mere shadow among the laughter and clinking glasses. His associates, oblivious to my true intentions, welcomed me with open arms, unaware that I was meticulously cataloging their discussions. One evening, the atmosphere was electric. My stepfather hosted a lavish party, a spectacle designed to showcase his wealth. I donned a mask of charm, engaging in small talk while my mind raced with the knowledge I had gathered. I listened closely as business deals were struck under the guise of pleasantries, the conversations draped in layers of deceit. I made mental notes of names, connections, and the underlying tensions that simmered just beneath the surface. My heart raced with the thrill of the chase, my resolve hardening with each whispered secret I unraveled. Then, one fateful night, as I lingered at the edge of a group discussing the intricacies of their latest venture, I stumbled upon a conversation that would solidify my plan. The hushed tones were laced with urgency, the words missing funds cutting through the air like a knife. My breath caught in my throat as I leaned in closer, straining to catch every detail. They spoke of a large sum of money that had vanished, and the implication that my stepfather was deeply entwined in the web of deception. My heart raced as I processed the gravity of what I had just overheard. This was the breakthrough I needed, a key piece of evidence that could expose his treachery. With the knowledge I had gathered, I felt a sense of purpose blossom within me. The weight of my mother's suffering hung heavily on my shoulders, and the thought of liberating her from my stepfather's grasp propelled me forward. I envisioned the moment when I would confront him, armed with undeniable proof of his corruption. It was a daunting prospect, yet the fire of vengeance burned brightly in my chest, illuminating the path forward. I returned home that night, my mind racing with possibilities. The house felt different, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath in anticipation of the storm to come. I glanced at my mother, her gentle presence a reminder of what was at stake. I knew I had to act carefully and strategically. Every move I made would be a step toward reclaiming our lives from the darkness that had enveloped us for far too long. As I lay in bed, the moonlight filtering through the curtains, I allowed myself to dream of a future free from fear. I envisioned a life where my mother could laugh again, where the echoes of my stepfather's cruelty would fade into the past. I clung to the hope that justice would prevail, that I could be the architect of our salvation. The plan was in motion, and with each passing day, I grew more resolute, ready to face the man who had betrayed not just our family, but the very trust one had once placed in him. As I stood in my dimly lit room, the soft glow of the desk lamp illuminating the scattered papers and notes that chronicled my stepfather's misdeeds, a sense of urgency surged through me. Each piece of evidence I had meticulously gathered felt like a small victory, a step closer to the justice I craved for my mother and myself. I could almost taste the anticipation in the air, thick and charged, as I plotted my next move. I had cultivated relationships with my stepfather's colleagues, weaving myself into their world with a delicate balance of charm and observation. It was a game of chess, and I was determined to win. The walls of our home, once a sanctuary, had transformed into a prison of secrets and lies. I had spent countless evenings eavesdropping on conversations, my heart pounding with every revelation. I could hear the whispers of betrayal echoing in my mind, reminding me of the man who had taken so much from us. Each day, I donned a mask of normalcy, engaging in idle chatter with my stepfather, all the while plotting my strategy beneath the surface. It was a dangerous facade, but one I had become adept at maintaining. As I navigated this treacherous terrain, I observed the subtle changes in my mother. There were times when the shadows of her past would flicker across her face, and I could see the weight of her experiences pressing down on her. But there were also moments of light, fleeting glimpses of the woman she used to be. I cherished those instances, pouring my energy into lifting her spirits while I quietly prepared for my revenge. I wanted her to feel hope again, to believe that the darkness would not engulf us forever. I made it a point to be present for her, organizing small outings that would allow us to escape our reality, if only for a little while. We would take walks in the nearby park, where the trees whispered secrets of resilience and renewal. I would laugh at her jokes, even the corny ones, reveling in the sound of her laughter, which had become a rare commodity in our household. I wanted her to see that life could be beautiful, even amidst the wreckage. But the reality was that the burden of our past loomed heavily over us. I could feel it like an invisible weight on my shoulders. I was playing a dangerous game, and I knew that every move I made could bring consequences I was not yet prepared to face. The thought of my stepfather discovering my plans sent chills down my spine, yet I pressed on. I had come too far to turn back now. With each passing week, my collection of evidence grew, and I began to envision the culmination of my efforts. I had spent countless nights poring over documents, cross-referencing transactions, and piecing together a narrative that would expose my stepfather for who he truly was. I was no longer just a frightened girl. I had transformed into a strategist, a warrior ready to reclaim our lives. The day I scheduled a meeting with the lawyer felt monumental. My heart raced at the thought of sharing my findings with someone who could help me bring my stepfather's empire of lies crashing down. I could almost hear the sound of justice echoing in the distance, a siren call urging me forward. I pictured the look on my stepfather's face when the truth was laid bare before him, his facade crumbling, the power he wielded over our lives finally stripped away. As I prepared for the meeting, I took a moment to breathe deeply, allowing myself to feel the weight of my resolve. I was ready to fight, not just for my mother, but for every woman who had ever been silenced by fear. I envisioned our lives post-revenge, a future where laughter filled our home again, where my mother could reclaim her spirit, and I could finally let go of the chains that had bound me for so long. With a sense of purpose igniting my every step, I left for the meeting, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. I was ready to confront the darkness that had plagued us for too long, to emerge victorious from the shadows. The house that had once been a symbol of our suffering was about to become the battleground for our liberation, and I was determined to see it through to the end. The confrontation loomed like a storm cloud over my head, heavy and oppressive. I stood in front of my stepfather's office, heart pounding, the evidence clutched tightly in my hands. The air felt electric, charged with a cocktail of fear and determination. I could hear the faint hum of the city outside, a world oblivious to the battle I was about to wage. I took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill my lungs, and pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit, with shadows dancing across the walls as the late afternoon sun filtered through the blinds. He was seated behind his large mahogany desk, a picture of calm authority. I had seen this man at his best, charming, charismatic, the kind of person who could command a room. But now, as I stepped into his domain, I could see the cracks in his facade, the tension in his jaw betraying the bravado he wore like armor. I laid out the evidence before him, a meticulously organized folder filled with documents, screenshots of emails, and testimonies from his associates who had unwittingly revealed his misdeeds. As I spoke, my voice steadied despite the chaos inside me. I watched the realization dawn on his face. First came disbelief, then anger. I could see him searching for words, grasping at straws, as if he could somehow talk his way out of the inevitable. "You think you can intimidate me with this?" he scoffed, his tone dripping with disdain. It was infuriating. I was no longer the naive girl he had manipulated for so long. I had spent months gathering this evidence, piecing together the shattered fragments of truth that painted a clear picture of his deceit. I was armed with knowledge, and I felt powerful for the first time. But as he sat there, his demeanor shifting from shock to indignation, I felt the weight of his threats hanging in the air. The man who had once been a father figure to me was now a cornered animal, and I knew that a cornered animal was the most dangerous of all. I had prepared for this moment, rehearsed it in my mind 1,000 times, but nothing could have prepared me for the cold, hard reality of facing him. The tension in the room thickened, wrapping around us like a noose, each word we exchanged tightening it further. I pressed on, unfazed by his attempts to belittle me. I revealed my backup plan, the anonymous tip I had drafted, ready to send to the authorities detailing his crimes. His expression shifted again, a flicker of fear crossing his features. For a brief moment, I savored that look. It was a taste of victory, a glimpse of the power I held in my hands. But it was fleeting. The threat of retaliation loomed large, and I could feel it in the air, a palpable tension that threatened to erupt at any moment. As I left the office, my heart raced, each beat a reminder of the path I had chosen. I walked down the corridor, the walls closing in around me, thoughts swirling in a chaotic dance. I had set into motion a chain of events that could not be undone. The gravity of my actions sank in, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of what I had done. I was no longer just a girl seeking revenge, I had become an agent of change, a force to be reckoned with. Outside, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the street. I stood there for a moment, letting the cool breeze wash over me, grounding me after the storm of emotions I had just faced. The world continued to turn, oblivious to my inner turmoil. I felt a sense of resolve settling within me, a quiet determination to see this through to the end. I could not turn back now. I had come too far and sacrificed too much. With each step away from that house, I felt the shackles of fear beginning to lift. I had taken a stand, and regardless of what came next, I knew I would face it head-on. The confrontation may have been just the beginning, but in that moment, I realized I was no longer a victim. I was a warrior, ready to fight for the truth and for my mother's freedom. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was prepared to navigate the darkness, knowing that the light would eventually break through. Days dragged on like a heavy fog, and with each passing hour, the weight of my actions pressed down on me. I found myself pacing the confines of my room, my heart racing with the anticipation of the chaos I had set in motion. The walls felt like they were closing in, and the silence of the house was deafening. I often glanced out of the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of my stepfather's car, to see him returning home with that smug grin plastered on his face, the one that had haunted my dreams for so long. But the car never came, and instead, the world outside continued with its mundane rhythm, indifferent to the storm brewing within my heart. Then, the news broke. It was a crisp morning when I heard the distant hum of the television echoing through the hall. My mother sat there, her eyes glued to the screen, a mixture of disbelief and hope flickering across her face. I stepped closer, the air around me thick with tension, and there it was, a breaking news segment about my stepfather being summoned by the authorities for questioning regarding financial misconduct. My heart leapt into my throat, a whirlwind of emotions crashing against the walls of my resolve. Part of me felt a rush of exhilaration, a vindication for the years of suffering we had endured. But another part of me was gripped by a chilling fear. What if this was just the beginning of something far more dangerous? As the days unfolded, the impact of my actions rippled through our lives. My stepfather's facade began to crumble, and with it, the oppressive atmosphere that had enveloped our home for so long. I watched as my mother slowly reclaimed fragments of her old self, her laughter echoing in the house like a melody that had long been silenced. We spent hours reminiscing about happier times, the shared stories weaving a tapestry of connection between us. I could see glimmers of hope in her eyes, a flicker of the woman she used to be. The weight of despair was lifting, and as we began to rebuild the remnants of our lives, I felt a sense of purpose growing within me. But just when the horizon seemed to clear, darkness loomed once more. An anonymous letter arrived, the crisp envelope a stark reminder of the perilous game I was playing. My hands trembled as I tore it open, the words searing into my mind. The threat was clear: back off, or risk exposure. Panic coursed through my veins like ice. Who could have known? Who was watching? The thrill of my victory began to fade, replaced by a gnawing fear that threatened to consume me. I was no longer just protecting my mother, I was now embroiled in a dangerous web of deceit, a player on a board where the stakes had never been higher. I felt like a puppet on strings, my every move scrutinized by unseen eyes. The thought of retreating crossed my mind, but the very idea made my stomach churn. I had come too far, fought too hard to let fear dictate my next steps. I thought of my mother and the progress we had made. I thought of the pain that had fueled my resolve. I could not allow my stepfather to win, not now, not ever. As I stood at that crossroads, the weight of the letter in my hand, I felt a surge of determination rise within me. I would not be silenced. I would not back down. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and defiance. I meticulously reviewed every detail of my plan, searching for loopholes, for ways to outmaneuver the shadow that threatened to engulf me. I became a ghost in my own home, slipping through the cracks, gathering more evidence, seeking allies in unexpected places. Every conversation held the potential for betrayal, every shadow, a reminder of the danger lurking just out of sight. I had to remain vigilant, to adapt and evolve, for the stakes had never been higher. As I lay in bed each night, sleep eluded me, replaced by a whirlwind of thoughts and strategies. I was no longer just a girl seeking revenge. I had become a strategist, a warrior in a battle that felt both personal and monumental. With every ounce of strength, I steeled myself for the inevitable confrontation that lay ahead. In this house that once felt like a prison, I was determined to carve out a future where my mother and I could finally be free. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but in that uncertainty lay the promise of justice. And I was ready to fight for it. The moment my phone buzzed with the anonymous letter, my heart dropped. The words stared back at me, taunting and threatening, a palpable reminder of the risk I had taken. I could feel the weight of my stepfather's associates pressing down on me, their loyalty to him a dangerous barrier between me and my goal. My hands trembled as I read and reread the note, each line igniting a firestorm of fear and doubt within me. But in that moment of despair, I remembered my mother's face, her eyes clouded with sadness and lost hope. I couldn't let her down. I couldn't back away now. With a sense of determination, I decided to confront this new complication head-on. I had come too far to let fear dictate my actions. The shadows of my stepfather's influence loomed large, but I was no longer the timid girl who cowered in the corner. I had gathered evidence, pieced together the puzzle of his deceit, and I could not allow myself to falter now. I would face the threats and any potential backlash. The stakes were too high, and I was ready to navigate whatever storm lay ahead. As the days passed, I honed my plan. I called upon the connections I had made, reaching out to those who had shown me kindness or seemed disillusioned with my stepfather. With each conversation, I carefully wove my narrative, ensuring I had allies who could confirm my findings. I could feel the tension in the air, thick with anticipation and dread, as I prepared for the pivotal moment that would change everything. Then came the news that sent a tremor through me. The authorities had announced that my stepfather was being arrested. The report was like a thunderclap echoing through my mind, drowning out the whispers of doubt that had lingered. I had done it. My meticulous work had culminated in this moment, this victory that felt both surreal and exhilarating. I had gathered the evidence and presented it clearly, and now the truth was finally surfacing. I could hardly believe it when I saw the police cars outside our house, lights flashing against the backdrop of the evening sky. My heart raced as I stood at the window, peering out as they led him away in handcuffs. There was a strange sense of satisfaction mingling with the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I felt empowered, invigorated by the knowledge that I had played a pivotal role in this moment. A rush of emotions washed over me, each one a testament to my journey, the fear, the anger, the determination, and now, the exhilaration of justice. And then, in a moment that felt almost cinematic, I turned to find my mother standing beside me. The look on her face was transformative, a smile breaking through the years of pain etched in her features. It was as if a dam had broken within her, letting in the sunlight that had long been overshadowed by despair. I felt tears prick at my eyes, a mixture of relief and joy spilling over as we embraced. In that moment, the house that once represented our suffering began to morph into a sanctuary of healing. As we held each other tightly, I could sense the weight of our past lifting, the chains of fear and abuse shattering around us. This house, which had been a prison, was now a place where we could reclaim our lives. The walls that had witnessed our anguish would now bear witness to our healing and growth. I could envision a future filled with laughter, hope, and love, a stark contrast to the darkness we had endured. We stood together, watching as the last remnants of my stepfather's influence were carted away. I felt a sense of finality wash over me, a closure that I had yearned for. The journey hadn't been easy, but I had emerged stronger, more resilient than I had ever imagined. As we stepped back from the window, the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, symbolizing a new dawn for both of us. We were free, and together, we would forge a path toward a brighter future.